It's not a fact in the same way as other things on our site is a fact, and I'll come back to that at the end. So there we are. What do our visitors make of this? This is a really challenging question. I have to think quite hard about how am I going to capture what our visitors make of it, because our Hall of the Princes has only been open a year and we haven't had our full year's visitor survey come back yet. So what I did was I looked at TripAdvisor and I just searched on roundhouses to try to see what are people saying about us. And it seems from the comments that I picked up, I just picked them in chronological order, that when I search on roundhouses, they're quite accepting of the roundhouses. They see it as a natural part of their experience when they come to St Fagans. There's one comment on the bottom right that shows that there are at least one person's picked up on the difference between an archaeological reconstruction and our original buildings. They see that intellectual difference. Not all of our visitors are looking to gather that understanding for themselves, but it's there for them, and at least one person picks it up. It's purely coincidental. These are all 5-star reviews, by the way. We're pretty much this chronological order. So I think that made me think a little bit harder about why is it that people are so accepting of archaeological reconstructions when we put them alongside our real historic buildings. And that made me think a little bit back to when I was at university. I was in the late 1980s, and at that point there was no general acceptance, I think, that you could take an archaeological site and fragmentary remains and reconstruct buildings. It was the kind of thing that would turn up on TV comedies, the sketch shows of people kind of pretending that you could go from here to here, and that was okay. So something has happened between the late 1980s and now for our public to accept these structures. I'm going to speculate a little bit on what those things might have been. I think the first thing is a really powerful force for archaeology, the best marketing tool archaeology in the UK has ever had, which is a television series called Time Team. And the format of Time Team was that a group of archaeologists, real archaeologists, would arrive on a site where they'd been told that there was nothing to see generally, but they were told there was some finds that had come up from the field. And they worked with a television presenter who was a famous TV comedian. And over the course of 3 days, they would dig very fast, very hard. And what the documentary would do is it would follow the story of how they took that raw evidence and worked it up. And they would always end with a reconstruction drawing. So the viewer could see the whole process themselves. They could hear the comedian making fun of the archaeologists, saying, well, you know, how on earth is it you believe this? And the archaeologists would have to justify themselves. So the net result of this was that over 280 episodes, around about a third of the UK population saw this and gained an understanding, whether they knew they were doing it or not, how archaeologists think. It was an enormously powerful tool. You can still see it. It's always on some channel or other in the UK. The other thing that happened in Wales, we were very lucky that in 1992, not coincidentally, when our roundhouses began, the Iron Age was put onto the national curriculum for school children. So all school children, aged 7 to 11, were introduced to archaeology, archaeological thinking. They were shown archaeological reconstructions and encouraged to understand how it is one goes from evidence to product. So over 1 million school children have been through that process. What I'm getting at is an enormous normalising of archaeological work from being a fringe academic discipline to being part of our basic understanding of how the past is constructed. And we at St Fagans have been a part of this process. We aren't not passengers in the process. We are active contributors to constructing the past. Since '92, we've had about 14 million visits. I would estimate that around a third of those visits have entered into our roundhouses at least. As a result of that, there's opportunities for those people to have seen for themselves the evidence, to have talked it through with the museum assistants who are in there, to make their own decisions. So we become active cultural players in formalising the past. And it's also the case, I think, that for many of our visitors, we probably aren't the first archaeological open-air museum that they visited. It seems to be a boom era across Europe, I'm sure further afield as well, where archaeologists are producing these reconstructions, attempting to present them to the public, varying degrees of success, varying quality, as there is in all of our museum organisations, I feel. But it's an area that is definitely growing. There's an appetite for it. And you can see that in the statistics for EXAR, which is the International Association of Archaeological Open-Air Museums, which was only founded in 2001, but you can see their membership numbers going up as more organisations become involved in this kind of business. So I'm guessing those are some of the contributing factors that make the production of archaeology at St Fagans and our presentation of it to the public a relatively normal part of the visitor experience. But I think there are some rules to the game, if you like. I think that what our visitors are looking for is not necessarily one particular kind of evidence. It's not that they're coming specifically for our historic buildings as real translocated items. They're looking for an experience. We see this from our visitor surveys, where a lot of our visitors are coming for a social experience, not necessarily for an educational experience. But the important rules of the game are we have to have researched to the highest degree that we possibly can. We cannot get all of academics to agree with us, but we have to have undertaken the research so that our visitors have continued confidence in the products that we produce. Clarity of message as well. We don't pretend that our archaeological reconstructions are the same as our historic buildings. We put them in a different part of our museum. Our signs illustrate clearly that these are based on different kinds of evidence. Our museum assistants are trained to present these buildings differently. But I think the openness about uncertainty, which I think you mentioned in your introduction, I think that's also key as well. It isn't a negative necessarily to open yourself up and say, we don't know exactly, but here's the reasons why we've made our decisions. And that encourages a lot of understanding of an understanding of historical critical thinking, if you like, amongst our visitors. They can see how the past is constructed. They can evaluate for themselves whether they believe our results. Some do, I'm sure some don't. But there we go. That's an important role that we have, not just telling people about the past, but helping them to make their own decisions about the past along the way. So I hope that's been of interest. I'll probably best stop there, actually. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. And I think as we are really in time, it would be nice to ask a question right now, because we have a more detailed insight now, and maybe there are questions from the audience. Are there any? Yes, please.
Yes. Maybe I can.
Just wait.
Anders Bjørto, Odense City Museums in Denmark. Very interesting presentation, which addresses the most sensitive part of the archaeologist's work, I would say, moving from 2D to 3D presentations. And when I think of it, I always think, well, there must be 50 other possibilities for reconstructing a building at a time. Don't you think it would be smart and very educational if you presented maybe two versions of what could have been, just to bring forward the notion that, well, this is not very objective, it could be one way of reconstructing, but there should be many others, or could be many others, and it could be all wrong, almost all wrong.
Well, I guess we're hoping it's not all wrong. Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point. In our original 3 roundhouses, we were showing 3 different construction techniques, different ways of using timber. One of them was with stone. Over the course of the 20 years that we were there, we learned that some were more effective than others, so we actually had to replace the whole roof structure because the initial hypothesis literally didn't hold water. I think it would be fantastic if we could present 2 different hypotheses in one site. And I think it would really get to the essence of what it is we're trying to do here. There's very few of our visitors that need to know about the Iron Age. It doesn't change their lives massively. But what I think is important is to get that understanding across about how history, how our pasts are formulated, so they can take that knowledge away and check it themselves, or check other things themselves as they go. Unfortunately, practicality is getting in the way. The roundhouse, each roundhouse costs around 50,000, like that. And resource limitations are the thing that get in our way on that. So it's practicalities rather than disagreeing with your principle.
Maybe a drawing.
Maybe a drawing. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, Gustav and then Peter first.
Yes, Gustav Olsson from Kulturmuseum of Sweden. I think this is an excellent idea, and I want to just say it does not only apply to the archaeological buildings. It could apply to any building at the museum. And we could, I'm thinking of which of the buildings at my museum can I apply this to. We could show it as it was in 1910 and 1860, for instance, to show that we actually make a choice of what time period to choose, to show.
Can I show a last slide? Oh, it's gone. Dash. I thought I had my slides on there. I think one of the things this gets into for me is the question about authenticity generally. And because of the nature of this session, I've polarized it as historic buildings and archaeological buildings, and one needs to justify itself a little more, perhaps. But when I look at St. Wagons, we have real buildings in their original location. We have real buildings translocated to the site. We have real buildings that have been copied on our site using different materials. We're always making these kinds of judgments. And I think, in a way, if we take the next step further, we start to break down that category of historic buildings. And then we also need to be presenting those quite critically to our visitors, perhaps more critically than we do at St. Wagons at the moment. So I think it would be lovely to show in all of our houses alternatives that could be.
So I have two more questions, it's Peter and Claire. Which one?
You'll be up here.
So really as a comment, picking up on that was another way of doing this is not to physically reconstruct, it's to digitally reconstruct. And there you have an enormous opportunity to both show multiple interpretations and to show certainty about what we've reconstructed, we have definite evidence of, and then what we've reconstructed that is based on hypothesis. Have you thought about introducing any virtual or augmented technologies?
So
I have now. I think that, to be honest, we've just come out of that major building phase. I think we're in that kind of second consolidating phase. But I think it's one of those things that, as we reflect on what we've done, we'll inevitably end up thinking about this other alternative interpretations, yes.
Well, we should talk.
We will.
So we have one last question, Claire. So
yes, thank you very much. And in a way, I wish to repeat what you said from Sweden. I think we can apply to other examples. And according to what we said yesterday, I think it's very, very important to get the confidence of the audience to the integrity of the work. And for me, it's a very, very important question. And also the openness to uncertainty, because we are always facing to this question at any periods. And also, in the beginning, you were mentioned the word imagination. And sometimes we are making an opposition between seriousness of research and imagination. And do you remember the burning of Notre Dame de Paris? Viollet Duc was a very good example of seriousness in a way, of the knowledge and also the strength of imagination. Thank you very much.
Well, I think poetry is a serious business too.
yeah, thank you very much again. So we have our second case study. It comes from Williamsburg in the USA, from one of the best-known living history museums that calls itself Outdoor History Museum. It's focused on the 18th century. It's a long journey from here to Poland, and we are very glad to welcome Dr. Peter Inker. He's an iconologist and started his career in Wales, so there are tight connections in our program, not by coincidence, I don't know. He's director of the Historical Research and Digital History at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And he's member of X-Arc, we already heard about it, an association that revolves around at least 500 archaeological open-air museums worldwide. The title of his case study is Archaeological Open-Air Museum, the Colonial Williamsburg Approach, and we are very much looking forward to the lecture. Can you put this screen?
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anka. My name is Peter Inkner. I am my official title is Director of Historical Research and Digital History, so even my title is multifaceted. I did grow up in Wales, so it was wonderful to hear Steve's talk on St. Fagans. I can remember as a very small child just running around and enjoying St. Fagans, and I think that was the place where my interest in the past actually began. So I'm British. I grew up in Wales. I'm an archaeologist. I did my research, my PhD in archaeology, and yet my title is historian and digital historian. And so I think what I'm going to talk about today is how multifaceted and how the barriers between archaeology, history, anything that we study in the past are artificial, essentially. That it's a multidisciplinary process. Archaeology is a very multidisciplinary process. And as I talk about Colonial Williamsburg, you'll see that I can't talk about one component without talking about the others. And likewise, I'll discuss a little bit of yesterday's topic in terms of cultural diversity, as well as the archaeological components of the Colonial Williamsburg experience. So thank you to AEOM for inviting me here, and likewise to X-Arc. So this is my second hat that I'm wearing as Director at Colonial Williamsburg, but also a board member of the X-Arc network as well. So when I discuss Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, what I will do is I will use the format of X-Arc, so you can understand a little bit about X-Arc as well as the foundation. So where is Williamsburg? In case you are unfamiliar with Williamsburg, it is on the east coast of America, about halfway between the northern border and the southern. In terms of travel, if you fly into Washington, D.C., we're about 2.5 hours south of Washington, D.C. In the 18th century, Williamsburg was the largest, most populous colony of the British Empire. And Williamsburg was the capital of that colony. So it was actually a very influential and important city. Today, it is not well known at all. Again, in our census from 1782, you can see that we had over 1,400 people. Almost half of those were enslaved African Americans. And so when we tell stories at Colonial Williamsburg, we try and tell the whole story. We're not trying to focus on white European stories. We're trying to show the diversity of the experience in America and what that meant for the people living there. Today, Colonial Williamsburg describes itself as the world's largest living history museum, although there is an archaeological open-air museum in Bulgaria that is challenging us for that title, although I haven't seen its full extent yet, so we will see whether we can continue calling ourselves that. We are 200 hectares in size, and annually we get over 500,000 visitors. Now, I'm deliberately a little vague on the numbers because this is what Williamsburg looks like today. So we're right in the center of modern Williamsburg. And the historic area is pretty much bounded, as you can see, by that red area. We don't have a wall. We only own the properties within that area. The streets themselves are actually owned by the city of Williamsburg. And so a guest or a visitor can enter at any point along this sort of outside border of the historic area and walk into the city. So when you buy a ticket, you actually have to be outside of this area, and the ticket will then get you into all of the life experiences and the buildings within the city. So we probably have 4 or 5 times the amount of the half-a-million visitors that we already have as walk-ins who don't actually ever buy a ticket. And we also have multiple visits by people who live in Williamsburg. In fact, we have huge retirement communities in Williamsburg where people have come to Colonial Williamsburg through the course of their life and then decided to retire in Williamsburg so they can actually just walk through the city. They can buy a ticket, they can buy an annual ticket, but they will enjoy just being in and around the old city of Williamsburg as part of their everyday life. So the city of Williamsburg began, like I say, in the 18th century. During the course of the 20th century, it was decided to excavate the original 18th century city. So this map from 1782 really shows you the kind of extent, that red area that I showed you in the earlier slide. There's been 90 years worth of research now done on the history of Williamsburg, and so as Williamsburg began, so began the techniques of historical archaeology and historical research, and in fact of architectural research on Chesapeake vernacular buildings as well. So the development of colonial Williamsburg went hand in hand with the development of all of those disciplines. That means that some of our earlier reconstructions we would not reconstruct in the way we have done today, and some of our sort of more recent reconstructions obviously use all of the techniques of modern interpretation. So we began in 1926 when the gentleman on the left, you can see there with his hat on his drawing, his name was W.A.R. Goodwin. He's the Reverend of the church in Williamsburg. And he realized that there were many buildings within Williamsburg that were still in situ, buildings that were built in the 18th century, but were in danger of being destroyed as the course of the 1920s went on. He reached out to Henry Ford of History is Bunk fame to see if he would help preserve the buildings in Williamsburg, and true to form, Henry Ford told him to go away. So then he reached out to John D. Rockefeller Jr., which is the guy who is the second from the right. And John D. Rockefeller Jr. decided, yes, this was an interesting project for him to invest his money in. He's probably the equivalent of Jeff Bezos today, which we could reach out to him. He began investing and buying properties, these 88 18th century buildings within the city of Williamsburg. Over the course of that period, then, once all of the buildings had been bought, they then started to do the archaeology in between the buildings. So we had 88 original buildings, and then our archaeologists came in to understand what other buildings were there representative of the 18th century city. So the goal was to reconstruct the entire 18th century city as a place that could be representative of the birth of America, the birth of the American Revolution and the birth of the American Republic. By 1935, so almost 10 years later, during this process, you can see the Capitol building here that was reconstructed. The building itself was razed, it burned down in the late 18th century, so it was not there during the 20th century. So it was purely reconstructed on archaeological footings and by architectural analogy. It was clear to Goodwin, though, that this wasn't enough, that just reconstructing buildings, as you can see here, left a void. It left the people out. So in a famous letter he wrote to John D. Rockefeller Jr., he mentions that through mute lips the living message should be given that will speak to the souls of the pilgrims of this place. And what he means here is we need more. We need to put the people back in this place, because ultimately the city is nothing without its people. I like to think of Le Corbusier here in terms of buildings as a machine for living in. They are machines, yes, but we also need the living in part, the human beings to incorporate into those buildings to provide the life and the meaning behind those buildings. So what does this mean? This is typified by what we call our nation builders. So you may or may not have heard of the American founding fathers. These are George Washington's, Thomas Jefferson's, the key men who created the American Revolution and really developed America. We like to describe the people of Williamsburg as nation builders, and that means, yes, that includes these key people. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, George Mason all were in Williamsburg. They developed their ideas, their concepts of revolution in Williamsburg. But it also includes people like Clementina Ryan. She was the first female printer in Virginia. So this is a major change in social structure in America. Or the Reverend Gowan Pamphlet, who is a famous African-American reverend at the time, who really structured the church around enslaved individuals up until then, who were actually had a difficult path to understanding their religions. Or Aggie of Turkey-Yale, who really is a nobody. She's just somebody who her life is impacted by all of these famous people, but you probably have never heard of her until you come to Colonial Williamsburg, where you can actually discuss with her, you can meet her in a modern form, obviously, and actually discuss the life of Aggie of Turkey Island. So we have over 250 costumed interpreters at any given time on the streets. That's a small proportion actually of our full staff. They take on first and third person interpretation, which I'll talk about later. We have 22 historic trades, 44 historic sites, that's buildings, and we are open 9 to 5 daily, 365 days of the year. So any day of the year you can come to Colonial Williamsburg and it will be open for business, which can be troublesome sometimes. But Christmas, for instance, is a really big time where many museums will actually be closed. That's actually one of our peak periods. So where does EXARC fit into this? Well, EXARC has 4 key areas that you can see here, and these really align very closely with the Colonial Williamsburg experience. So the first of these are as an archaeological open-air museum. So technically we kind of straddle open-air museums and archaeological open-air museums, because we have 88 in situ buildings that would class as an open-air museum, although in total we have 600 buildings, that's including all of our reconstructed or preserved or conserved, or it goes to, I think, the question Steve was answering, that we have buildings, half of which are original 18th century structures and half of which are reconstructions. So what do we actually call that building? Is that a reconstruction or is that an original building? We also work with ancient and traditional technologies, which I'll talk about shortly. EXARC, very core to its being, is the experimental archaeology component, and then obviously interpretation is another element. EXARC has over 300 members in 40 countries, and you can see the pie chart there on how they actually split up. And our last conference in Trento this year had over 191 attendees. So to address that first thing, archaeological open-air museums practice. EXARC defines that as a non-profit permanent institution with outdoor true-to-scale architectural reconstructions, primarily based on archaeological sources, while the majority of our buildings are based on archaeological sources, but not all of them. We do hold collections of intangible heritage resources and provide interpretation of how people lived in the past. This is really the core to the Colonial Williamsburg experience. It's not just the physical, but it's also the intangible. And we are based soundly in scientific methodologies, and I'll speak a little bit when I describe how many people actually work in terms of research at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. So going back to this map, just to situate you, this is the Frenchman's map of 1782, and it really provided the foundation for the reconstruction of the city. The city actually began in 1699 when the capital moved from Jamestown, which was the first permanent English settlement in North America. And then in 1782, it moved to Richmond, where the capital of Virginia is today. So Williamsburg itself became a kind of backwater by the 1920s. And this illustration here shows you what some of our original buildings looked like in the 1920s. The Prentice store here was actually built in 1739, and by 1928 it had been converted into a garage to fix cars. So again, is this an original building or not? It has been occupied since 1739, and today it is reconstructed as a store from the mid-18th century. So this is probably the longest open store in North America, permanently been used, but obviously its usage has changed over time. So talking to the educational component, we are an AAM, so that's the American Alliance of Museums Accredited Association. We have currently 21 archaeologists on our staff, 5 architectural historians, 12 curators, 3 historians, and 8 educators. We have so many archaeologists right now because we have a big 5-year project funded to excavate a large area of the southwest corner of colonial Williamsburg, which was not well excavated during the 1930s. And that's an ongoing project that will support archaeologists into the future. We also have a number of broader external links. So we run a number of archaeological field schools and architectural historians field schools with the College of William and Mary, which is right on our campus. We also have research fellowships, so if anyone is looking to come to colonial Williamsburg and wants their fellowship to pay their way, by all means take a look at our website. Curatorial internships. We have a large pipe and drum corps, which brings in children from the age of 10 to 18, and they're one of our kind of key features. Everyone knows the colonial Williamsburg fife and drum, and if you spent a couple of days at Williamsburg, you'll probably not want to hear the sound of fifes and drums for a long time after. We also have over 800 volunteers, so they don't work on site, but they do a lot of the kind of background work and background support to the foundation. Allied to the historic area, so these are the buildings and the reconstructed buildings and the interpreters, we also have 2 very large museums and galleries. That's the DeWitt Wallace Decorative Arts Museum and the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Folk Art Museum. And I have some facts here for you. Nearly 70,000 examples of American, British fine and decorative mechanical art, 5,000 pieces of American folk art, 15,000 architectural fragments, 20 million archaeological fragments. I can go on. But we are not only, yes, okay, I just need to quickly move on. Component of outreach is our Teacher Institute, which connects with educators from across America. So we bring educators in to understand how to teach history and understand archaeology. I'd like to describe what we do not as edutainment, but phenomenology, in terms of we try and put people in the experience as opposed to just entertaining them, so they can actually begin to understand stories of the past and understand in different ways. And I think that's the basis of the colonial Williamsburg experience is providing multiple ways of understanding the past. And I realize I'm running out of time, so I'm going to run through these very quickly. So we do a lot of ancient and traditional technologies. We have an active trades program where all of our tradesmen and women are primarily workers in those trades, and they work in the sites that those trades were done on. So the blacksmith is where the blacksmith was, the carpenters are where the carpenters were, etc. We also have a thriving experimental archaeology school and a fellowship again, so if anyone wants to do experiment. When we have a single built building, how do we then capture all of the process of time, the change, the different alternative versions, certainty of what pieces we can be certain of, what are not. We can do that virtually using metadata. And then finally, sort of major component is our interpretive core, who work with the National Association of Interpretation here, another American body. We work in first and third person. We also have dramatic museum theatre. These are staged set programs, after which the actors come off the stage and answer questions about where the historical research came from that actually supported the program. And we also consider our costume as part of interpretation, how a person stands, how they behave, have a lively rare breeds program. And then finally, I think Colonial Williamsburg really is about that multiplicity of different ways of experiencing the past and allowing our guests to discover different ways of accessing the past. And my last word on this is, we're often asked questions that are contextualized in the 21st century. What we try and do is provide them with an 18th century answer to those questions. Sometimes that's difficult, but it begins to open up a new way of thinking for people that the past actually is a way of understanding the future. There you go. Thank you.
So it's a big museum for short lecture. Thank you very much. I think now you can ask questions first concerning this presentation, and after this we have a general question. So is there a special question to Peter? Yes.
Right at the end, you get. No. Thank you. Right at the end, Peter, you gave a kind of tantalising hint about 21st century questions being answered in a quite challenging 18th century way. I'm just intrigued. Can you give an example of what you meant by that?
Well, literally in the past month, I've gathered a team together to address LGBTQ. So people are now coming into the historic area and saying, where are the gay people? Where are the lesbians? We need to develop a way of answering that question, because clearly there were gay and lesbian in the past. They were hidden, much like our enslaved population were hidden. The documentation isn't there to capture that. So this team is going out to find that documentary evidence, to find those answers. And so people may not have identified the same way in the past, but we can begin to show that all of those hidden voices are there, and we have to develop answers to answer those questions because those people were there. So it's difficult, but it's very difficult.
Is there another question for Peter? Claire? Just thinking?
Just, are you facing to controversial question relating to cultural heritage due to the name of your museum, Colonial Williamsburg? Are you facing and dealing with controversial questions?
Our marketing department is desperate to get rid of the name Colonial. But at the same time, they know that it has such name recognition, we can't get rid of it. I think we need to embrace that. And that becomes a point of, okay, so what does colonial mean? And begin to address those questions instead of either rejecting the term entirely or getting rid of it. Let's actually use it as a place to begin a conversation about what colonialism is, what effect it has on people, and why today we would never attempt to be colonial. But in the past it was acceptable, as was slavery.
So, yes, Eva?
What kind of education do your interpreters get? How do you work that out?
So their initial education is just a simple onboarding process. It takes about 3 weeks where they get very basic information. And then we're actually going through a major reassessment of how we educate. And so we'll have an online component which will allow them to learn at their own speed. But then they also get classes, so my historians will teach classes on everything from the African American community to how to physically behave in terms of your manners and the way you stand even. So it's a broad range, but it's an ongoing series. They don't just get trained once. This is an ongoing series of trainings that they go over the course of a year and really over the course of their professional life. And the goal is to move them from somebody who perhaps has very limited experience to somebody who in and of themselves, has the equivalent of an undergraduate degree in the period. And in fact, some of our interpreters come in with no experience at all, but some are graduates of William and Mary, or they work for us as interns during the summer, and they may actually be undergraduates and postgraduates in historical studies. So we have a wide range of people when they come in. Likewise, our trades, some of those people come in as skilled artisans and tradesmen and women as well. So for them, it's really a way of developing their historical knowledge as opposed to their actual experiential knowledge.
Hilda, please.
I apologize for running over. I timed it as 15 minutes, but obviously I waffled.
I was just thinking how we all come to America without using a plane.
Yeah.
It would take too much time, I think.
Well, we were musing on that the other day about whether we could all take ships or something, but
We can't take 3 months off. Well, we do nothing, so Hilda.
I was wondering, do you know what messages or what knowledge your visitors take home? How do you measure it? And does it accord with the message or the knowledge or the interpretation you want to give your visitors?
yeah, this is an interesting question. We do measure it. We actually send out a questionnaire to a representative sample of guests every single month. We actually get a very high feedback on that. I don't know if it's cultural or not, but our guests really like to talk. And so we used to have 3 open boxes to allow them to feedback. Now we've had to reduce that to 1 because otherwise they'll just keep talking. It's an interesting dilemma because some people come to us expecting this very conservative, very Republican, very nationalistic story. And people will find that that's not what they get. They actually get a very broad brush story that doesn't flinch at looking at the difficult subjects. For some people, that is actually quite difficult for them to hear the story from an enslaved person. Sometimes it's because they just don't want to hear it. Sometimes it's because it's very emotional. And so, we get a broad range of feedback, but in general, we have a 92% approval rate, which is pretty high. So I think from what we get, it seems to show that we are being successful in that area.
So, thank you very much again. Thank you, Peter, for your And now we have 10 minutes left for a general discussion on how close we are with the Archaeological Museum. Up to now, it seems to be a big friendship, and I think it's all about being sensible in many ways. But maybe they're different, so I open the floor. Is there a comment on the main topic, the relationship between open air museum of different kinds? Is there someone with a statement, maybe, or a question? Yes, Henry, please.
Well, I want to tell you all a little about the background for this seminar, this arrangement this morning. I've had the pleasure to have contact with the previous presidents of our organization, and I understand that we have had proposal from EXARC for at least 15 years time of some sort of collaboration. And we decided in our board when we had the question, when I had the question, that it would be wise now to get just a little closer and know more about one another. And as you may get the impression from the presentation from Peter and our colleague from St. Packings, that EXARC seems to be a very professional, very energetic organization. Lots of things is happening there, and that is certainly true. Please visit their website. Lots of things is happening. When we look at the website of AUM, nothing is happening. Well, we meet every second year, but that's about it, and then we have our subgroups, of course. So it's very different organizations, and we discussed it for a longer time in the current board. Why has this been an issue for 15 years? Why has nothing been happening? And we don't really know. So this is a test, what you have experienced this morning, getting to learn a little more about our colleagues in EXARC, our sister organization. There are smaller differences between the organizations, but we simply from the board side do want to know, well, how do you experience this? Could this be a way forward, getting a bit closer to one another, know more about each other's projects and ideas and aspirations and whatever? That's about it. So I think we in the board are very curious to have some response from you. How should we proceed? So I would welcome any comment on that, please.
So, there's a comment? Yeah.
I would like to say something about
Well, to me, as I told yesterday, I'm only 1 year into the open air music museums business. So, and when I look at these kind of presentations, I think, well, as an audience in Holland, where I come from, the Netherlands, I should say. Mostly it's a choice. I go to the Archeon in Western Holland, or I go to the Open Air Museum. But it is the same frame I have in my head, choosing an open air museum or an archaeological site. I am interested in something. So, looking at from the audience side, I think it's very interesting because we have a lot in common. And I was just talking to my colleague. We are now thinking about developing a new phase in our museum. It's about everything that happened after World War II, so 1950 till now. And I said, well, we started around 1500. Why not go back a little further instead of going forward? As you said, people, it doesn't change the lives of people, but they're interested in it. So I think it's a very interesting discussion about what you show. How do you get the people in? I was already very interested in living history. We don't do it on purpose. We don't do it because we say, well, it will be a little bit of edutainment, but I would like to have a discussion about it, because you do it and you say it's not edutainment. We do it, educational, etc. So there's a lot of things in common which are very interesting, and you have a different angle because, well, we as a full museum see things a little bit different regarding our collection and handling this, but yeah, we could learn a lot from each other, I think. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Nina Eklöf. I work at Skansen in Stockholm, Sweden. Head of the educational unit there, but I'm also an archaeologist, so I'm very happy for this morning, a very interesting session. I just have a reflection that the archaeological open-air museums are often built on the site of where you have the archaeological excavation. And when I look at the open-air museums, we very much relocate houses to one site. So I just have this reflection, is it necessary to build the open archaeological open museums on site, or can we actually reconstruct the houses or the buildings somewhere else than on the archaeological site?
I think we asked the specialist for some questions.
I should declare a vested interest in, because I was the chair of EXARC for a time, although I'm not on the board anymore. Yes, there are archaeological museums that are based on the original sites, and there's quite a big debate as to whether that's the right thing to do, because it leads to problems of further excavation. I would imagine, I think the majority of archaeological museums are on separate sites from where the original buildings are, and certainly that's the case for St Bagans, where it's the same thing. We've taken excavated sites from across Wales and chosen to build them in the south of Wales. So I think that's something which it is an issue for some archaeological museums, but probably not for the majority, I would think.
Thank you. Is there another comment?
I did have a comment here. I was on the EXARC side of this before I was involved in your organisation. And one of the things that came up in conversation a lot is EXARC has a lot of very new organisations. A lot of them were set up in this millennium. They have an awful lot to learn. They're bold, they're ambitious, they have visitors coming through en masse. But one of the conversations that comes up repeatedly, or did whilst I was involved with the board, was a question about standards and elevating all of those organisations' standards so that the quality is there for the visitors. And I think that's one of the attractions from an EXARC point of view of greater involvement with AEOM. In a way, you're the big brother organisations here. Many of you have been around for decades and decades. You've spent a long time raising the standards in your organisations. And I think you have an awful lot to bring to that archaeological world as well, in terms of your knowledge, your expertise, that level of experience. So yes, there are some perks from the archaeological side if you do decide for a greater collaboration.
Yeah. Thank you. So this sounds like an invitation, and I think we should be polite. Maybe I just heard that in Kyoto next week they're discussing the mission of the museum. So I think we are getting colleagues who have presented their papers. Thank you very much again for coming here. Yeah, maybe we can say. And now it's a coffee break of a quarter of an hour, and it would be very kind if all the people who will give a short presentation after the coffee break would sit down here, so we don't have time of transportation. And please pass your presentation to Jaroslav, so we can start here at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Jag jobbar med något annat jag håller på med. Jag ska gå och ta en bild på They don't really have a place for the poster, so no, but you just laid it out.
But I made it on a few slides now.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, good. Aber da wäre kein viel gesagt. Ja. Ja, weil Konkurrenzfahrt.
Marek, jeśli chodzi potem o dyskusję w grupach,
Also die Straße dieser neuen CD ist das Bild, ich habe es gesehen, die sind von mir. Also ich weiß nicht,
But your expose is very, very interesting. Thank you. Bye.
Fantastic, that's a fantastic place that we're going to
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, well, you can.
Anyway, yes, please.
I sent you an email with my presentation, but only this
Yes,
morning.
to me or to Evelina Weber?
Not to you.
Fine. Today?
Yes, this morning.
The stuff was very heavy.
Yes.
Yeah, big storm.
Yes.
You move to the Evelina, I can make any call
toob kohe nagu pulga siia. Ja siis ta ütles, et tal download ib selle sinna alla, et tal on seda
Gdzie znajdziemy sekretarza? To jest przy wejściu gdzieś, czy?
Sekretarz jest na samym końcu,
Tam gdzieś tak, gdzie wejście?
pierwszym piętrze.
Tam trzeba wejść, tak?
Tak, zaraz na sekretarz.
So Evelina, have you got my memory stick? Yes, about this is Lena.
So please take a translator, translating machine, because we have one presentation in German. Speak German, please. So, dear colleagues, everybody with us again? I think we should start our next session. In the program you find the word poster session, but as I mentioned yesterday, it was a little bit difficult with poster and presentation. And you look at these wonderful walls, you wouldn't stick a poster on such a beautiful wooden wall. So we switched we have changed to short presentations, which give our colleagues the opportunity in 5 minutes to outline their project. And if we are punctual, we will use around 3/4 of an hour. So there's some time left to ask the colleagues afterwards in smaller circles a question. Because our lunch starts at 12:30. So, as I said, if we are really punctual, you still have some time afterwards. We don't ask questions in between because this would stretch the whole process too much. So, I'm happy that Niels Meyer from BMW is the first presentation. And can I find it?
Thank you. So I split my poster into a few slides. We are going to make a new entrance building in Gamleby. For many years we struggled with very poor conditions at the entrance and a very bad first impression for our visitors. The first problem was the parking areas. It was very small and often occupied by pendlers, so that's a bad first impression for a guest. And secondary, the entrance that we have now is quite poor with small conditions for service. But luckily we have a very nice museum behind all these barriers, so people still come. But 2 years ago we held an architecture competition for a new entrance. And five bureaus participated, and we had a project chosen by the jury. But we also did something else before we made this competition. We decided to move the entrance from the present situation to the south of the museum. And it has some very good reasons. We now, when we open this new entrance, we will face the city of Aarhus. At the moment, you have to kind of go back on the museum to catch the entrance. So this will be more facing the city, more inviting. And there will be a new, very large parking area in a new neighborhood. So that's 2 good reasons. And in the new entrance, we can have much better service, of course. I'll come back to that. But we also will have to face, we're going to reverse our chronology. So we will start in the present and we'll go back in time. The guest will go backwards. So that's a new challenge. And we have some specialty in the new building and choose between open air and underground. I will come back to that too. If you look the other way, the drone photos, you see Aarhus, the city, and it's rising up. They're building new offices, new dwellings, and at the right there's a big parking area on the ground, which is very near to the new entrance. That's why one of the reasons why we're putting it there. It will be around where you see the building sites, this area. And this is what the guest will meet in a few years when we finish this. We haven't started yet, but we'll start next year, the constructions. It is a modern building, of course. We don't want to compete with the old original buildings. This is a contemporary building. It's in an area with huge offices and so on, so we have to be very visible to point out the entrance for the guests. And when you enter this building, it's designed like a kind of roundabout. You can go around a wooden core. You might see it on the photo. There's a lot of wood inside. It's like a tree or like a structure that goes up, and it forms a core in the house, which you can move around. And moving around this roundabout, the guest will have different services, different information. That's the whole idea of this building. Here's a map of the Gamleby. If you see it's pointed in the right corner where the new entrance will be. And some of you will recognize the modern area of our museum right here. That's the 70s, as we call it. And this street will divide the new entrance and the 70s quarter, but it will rearrange this street as a 2014 area, almost the present. So when you come as a guest in a few years, you will actually arrive in the present and you will move back in time. And we have much better accessibility in this area with pavement and elevators and so on. So it's also a better experience for the disabled people. And one of the challenges is how do we get people back in the older part of the museum when we change the entrance? Will they just stay in this area and have all the good new experiences, or will they move up to this area? So at the moment we're working on new projects, doing this more exciting, putting up more living history, more craftsmanship and so on. A very nice family area with a playground and so on. So that's a strategy connected to the new entrance to make the whole museum work again in this new situation. So, and last is a small photo from the inside. It will start next year and we will open, I think, early 2022. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Muzeum Wsi Opolskiej. I am from Bucharest, from National Village, the biggest familiar museum in Romania. And I came prepared with a poster, physical poster, but I present a digital poster because the wall doesn't have legs. Okay, this is a poster.
Yes, I have a point. It's not very. Sorry. It's not very clear. It's not very clear. But I show you some interesting photo. This is my museum. This is my village. This is a new village. Sorry. This is all the village, and this is the new village. In this new village, we have a street named the Alley of Minorities, because we bring in this small village, have 3.5 hectares, 30
houses, 30 houses of minorities, other population in Romania, like German people, Ukrainian people, Jewish people, and these Kutsan people. You know Kutsan people? Everybody? No. This is a population come in Romania after before 18th century. It's from Pocuția. It's a population half Ukrainian, like this. It's a mix. It's a strong people. The name of these people is from the horses. Kutsan. Kutsan is a very strong breed of horses, and this population named after the horses. In this picture, I show this kind of people, and I show you one house from Maramureș, come to this mountain and rebuilding in our museum. This houses was empty houses in the ridge of the mountain, and bringing to our museum, and come is like this right now. It's like this with carpet, with all this equipment. That's it.
Dear colleagues, I will speak in German. My English is not so fluent, and I have only 5 minutes. I will tell you a bit about Common. We have a new building group. Wir haben eine neue Baugruppe, die heißt Marktplatz Rheinland. Wir bauen sie schon auf seit ungefähr 8 Jahren. Und ich habe in Norwegen das erste Mal davon berichtet, was wir mit dieser Baugruppe bezwecken. Wir haben ja 4 alte Baugruppen, historische Baugruppen, die die letzten 500 Jahre erklären, und mit der neuen Baugruppe, die man oben sieht, hier haben wir mittlerweile 8 Gebäude aufgebaut. Wir haben eine Gaststätte, Zeitschrift 1974. Wir haben eine Gaststätte, Zeitschrift 1974, einen Bungalow, ein Quelle-Fertighaus. Wir haben hier ein Flüchtlingsheim. Wir haben Missenhütten, und wir haben jetzt das neueste Gebäude, eine Kirche, eine evangelische Kirche gebaut. Die evangelische Kirche ist eine Badning-Notkirche. Badning ist ein Bauhausarchitekt. Er hat die wesentlichen Ideen des Bauhauses formuliert, und er hat in der Nachkriegszeit ein Notkirchenprogramm aufgelegt, wo er Diaspora-Kapellen und Notkirchen kreiert hat, quasi als Bausatz. Man konnte als Gemeinde sich die Bauteile bestellen. Die wurden geliefert, aber man konnte Teile der Kirche auch selber bauen. Die Idee war, einen multifunktionalen Raum zu schaffen, wo sowohl Gottesdienste gefeiert werden können, als auch Gemeindearbeit. Und der besondere Trick dabei war, dass man den Altar hinter einer großen Tür verschieben konnte, und damit hatte man einen großen Raum, in dem man auch feiern konnte. Die Bänke wurden zusammengestellt, dazwischen wurden Klapptische aufgestellt, und man hatte einen Gemeinderaum. Diese Kirche war am 22. Juli 1951 eröffnet worden in Overath, das ist im Rheinisch-Bergischen Kreis in der Nähe von Köln, von einer Gemeinde, die aus evangelischen Flüchtlingen aus den östlichen Ländern stammte und von Evakuierten. Und es war ein rein katholisches Gebiet. Man bekam einen Bauplatz außerhalb des Ortes an einem Steilhang, den man sich zurecht gebaut hat und dort eben eine Diasporakapelle errichtet hat. Und die Gemeinde ist sehr stark gewachsen in den letzten Jahren und im vorletzten Jahr wurde beschlossen, eine neue Kirche zu errichten und wir konnten diese wunderbare Bartning-Kapelle übernehmen. Wir haben sie 68 Jahre nach der Ersteröffnung haben wir sie eingeweiht und das Besondere an der Kirche ist, dass wir im Vorfeld sehr viele Interviews mit Zeitzeugen machen konnten, die eben aus der Gemeindearbeit erzählt haben, die Geschichte der Kirche erzählt haben und wo wir auf Dauer versuchen, auch eine Kooperation zusammenzuführen, die bedeutet, dass also zum Beispiel auch Gottesdienste bei uns abgehalten werden können, Hochzeiten und so weiter, sodass man die Region Bergisches Land, aber vor allem die Gemeindemitglieder aus Overath auch damit an das Museum bindet. Das zweite Projekt, das in diesem Jahr noch stattgefunden hat, ist die Versetzung einer Milchbar aus Brühl, ein Bau, der 1955 in Brühl, das in der Nähe von Köln, entstanden ist und zunächst erstmal eine reine Milchbar war, ausgestattet im Stile der 50er Jahre, wunderbare Verkleidungen. All diese Dinge sind unter den neuen Verkleidungen der letzten Jahre noch erhalten. Es wurde zunächst Milchshakes und Milchgetränke ausgeschenkt, dann hat man Alkohol dazu genommen, dann war es das Rockerzentrum des Ortes, man hat dort die Rocker verköstigt und eben als quasi besondere Gäste betreuen können und wollen auch. Nach dem Tod des Wirtes hat der Sohn es übernommen und hat einen Rockschuppen daraus gemacht mit Billardraum und entsprechend der Plattensammlung, die sich an den Wänden befindet, wo ich, als ich das erste Mal in diese Gaststätte reinkam, gedacht habe, das ist mein Plattenschrank, der dort an der Wand befestigt ist. Also es ist wirklich ein Schritt zurück in die Zeit, auch mit Musikbox und allem drum und dran. Wir haben diese Milchbar am letzten Wochenende am Stück versetzt. Das waren 68 Tonnen, die aus einer sehr engen Straße dann nach Pommern versetzt wurden. Und es war ein reines Volksfest. Und das zeigt, wie wichtig es ist, mit den Zeitzeugen in Kontakt zu treten, die Zeitzeugen einzubinden in die Arbeit, die Zeitzeugen aber auch dann entsprechend zu befragen und auch ihnen Raum im Museum zu geben. Beispielhaft war der Rocker-Chef, der noch lebt, der in den End-60er Jahren dort mit seiner Gang aufgefahren ist, der also sich schon angekündigt hat, auch ins Museum zu kommen. Also das sind auch Dinge, auch wieder in einer Art Einbindung der Zeitzeugen in das Museum, wo wir also auch Möglichkeiten schaffen müssen, diese Details dann auch im Museum zu präsentieren, aber auch den Interessierten dann Raum zu geben, dort eben zu verweilen und auch entsprechend aufzutreten. Also ich komme nach Pommern, war das am letzten Wochenende. Wir haben ja schon bereits das Quelle-Fertighaus, da habe ich vor 4 Jahren schon darüber berichtet, mit einer wundervollen Ausstattung aus den 1960er Jahren. Wir suchen aber noch eine Tankstelle, wir haben aber auch einen Friseurladen, wir brauchen dafür aber noch die Gebäude. Das ist das, was wirklich schwierig geworden ist in den letzten Jahren, dass man die entsprechenden Gebäude sich aussuchen kann. Mein Vorvorgänger Zipelius, der ja auch hier AOM mitgegründet hat, ist ja in den 50er Jahren noch über Land gefahren und konnte sich die Gebäude aussuchen. Diese Zeiten sind für uns vorbei, wir müssen das nehmen, was angeboten wird und was bei uns ins Konzept passt. Und deswegen ist bei uns auch sehr wichtig, und dann gehe ich nochmal auf das erste Bild dann zurück, dass wir durch den roten Faden, den wir in unserer Baugruppe bilden konnten, über die Gebäude 110, 111 und auch das Flüchtlingsheim Nummer 113 aus dem Jahr 1991, dass wir dort einen roten Faden bilden können mit dem Tenor. Wir zeigen das Leben, das Wohnen, aber auch das Arbeiten in Notsituationen, in Notzeiten. Also das Wohnen in der Nissenhütte und das Wohnen im Flüchtlingsheim sind 2 sehr schöne Beispiele, einmal aus den End-40er Jahren, wo in den Nissenhütten ja natürlich auch bis in die 60er Jahre zum Teil dann gewohnt wurde, aber eben auch mit dem Flüchtlingsheim aus der jüngsten Vergangenheit. Dankeschön.
is from Bokrijk, the Open Air Museum. I've been working in the museum for over a year now, and that is mostly in the field of research and participation, which combines greatly when it comes to community work I'm doing mostly. We all wear different hats at our museum, and I have been involved in the world of Bruegel, and I'm delighted to tell you about this very nice exhibition. So Bokrijk and Bruegel, they are very much linked together, they relate strongly. Bruegel, in his paintings, he captures normal people and their peculiarities and their customs, their habits, their utensils. And Bokrijk also tells a story of everyday life, so there we have this very strong link. It is telling also that our first curator, Dr. Josef Weens, he wrote a letter to the governmental administration in the 50s, proposing a new title for the museum as Bruegel Home. So here we are now, it's Bokrijk Open Air Museum and not Bruegel Home, but that points to the strong relation between Bokrijk and Bruegel. So what is more, we tried also to translate this whole story into today's world. Bokrijk is a composite landscape, meaning the cultural landscapes were brought together, just as Bruegel, the painter, merged a range of landscapes and impressions into one single commanding composition. Bokrijk and Bruegel, that's also stories about ourselves to share. Bruegel, he holds up a mirror to the visitor, and it makes it very relevant nowadays. And also the visitor can experience how topical the work of Bruegel still is nowadays. So what can we offer? We have a very nice interactive and experiential route throughout the museum. It's with a routing, which is very interesting, with an interactive game. It can be played from 4 years old to 104. It's included in the entrance tickets, and we also have some educational derivatives for groups and schools, such as a workshop, very hands-on, a guided tour with specialized Bruegel guides, and the interactive game. In the months of July and August, there is our Bruegel Theatre, the Theatre of Senses, which is very much in the rhetoric of Bruegel's era, and it's in open air, also for a large public, and it's included in the entrance tickets. So I will now show you some of the stops you can encounter, some of the interactions you encounter during your route you're taking. So this is the multimedia installation. As you know, the seasons by Bruegel are 6 of them, and 1 is lost. We had this contemporary artist, Fritz Jurs, working on this lost season. It's a very nice installation. The work that Fritz created is a combination of all the landscape elements he found in Bokrijk, and it's a loop of 38 minutes with all nowadays elements in it for the visitor to detect. Then we have this question about the poor kitchen, the rich kitchen, where the visitor also can connect to different objects of daily life, but where we also challenge the visitor to go deeper and to ask himself, what is a poor kitchen nowadays, what is a rich kitchen? So these are some of the objects that are shown in the exhibition. We don't have any painting. We expect the visitor to look at Bokrijk as if he is stepping into Bruegel's landscapes. But there are some real 16th century objects in the exhibition, and they relate, of course, strongly to all the objects that are shown in the work of Bruegel. This is very nice. And this is the Theatre of Senses. Yeah, I don't have to explain, I think. It's very much in the rhetoric of Bruegel's era. And in the end of the exhibition of the route, the visitor steps into the painting of Bruegel himself. He becomes part of Bruegel's work. I will tell you more about the interactive game that we developed. It's a kind of augmented reality. People have to go to an info point where they will get their gesture bracelets, as I show here. And in fact, it's a bit of a reference to Bruegel's children's game, and we expect the visitor to behave as the homo ludens, the playful human, which is hidden in each of us. Bruegel's paintings themselves are very much like visual puzzles. So you will step into this game and make this puzzle yourself. The people will look and search for objects that are hidden throughout the museum, and these objects are put then on the virtual head. It looks complicated, but it's really simple. This is a RFID bracelet, and it's linked to your personal head. So headdresses in Bruegel's time, Bruegel was very remarkable for all of his headdresses. We have, for instance, here the beehive, which is a symbolic, has a symbolic reference to the papal tiara. All these heads are really nice examples that you can find in the paintings. So when you collect your objects to your virtual head in a virtual mirror, you can then go throughout the museum and also play along, and some games will be talked about. The games are also interactive and related to the painting itself. For instance, you can catch some waffles with your hand. All the waffles were famous party food in Bruegel's time. In the end, so you can pimp your head, you can win a prize, a trip to Vienna with the whole family. These are some of the objects that you can find throughout the route. And they are linked to this crystal where the object is hidden in, and it comes up to the visitor. Some of the stops throughout the route, you will encounter the wild man in the forest, which is a bit scary, but has a nice element in itself. So I invite you to come and play along in Bokrijk with one game. Thank you.
And now it's Beatrice Kotler from Malmö.
This is just the introduction. Can I change it? Oh. Yes. Okay, I will tell you something about our. I will tell you something about our latest translocation. It's a tilery from the Bernese Jura in Switzerland, from Paris, and we have translocated this tilery from 2015 to 2017. And from then on, we started to bring back the tilery to life and to reappropriate this tilery. So what did we do? We started an exhibition about how the tilery worked. So it was a communal tilery used by several people in the village of Paris. It was last used in 1907, so it hasn't been used for more than 110 years. And we want to bring back this tilery to life in a year, in September 2020. And for that we need tiles, we need bricks, we need something to burn. And I said we appropriated this tilery. Of course, we invited the municipality, we invited schools from Paris for the inauguration, but also for the production of tiles in this tilery. And you can see on the image above, you see pupils from Paris forming tiles, and they are then stored in the big drying shed. So as you can see below,
The building consists of two parts. It's a big shaft kiln where the tiles have been burned, and the other part is the wooden construction, is the drying hall, the big drying hall. So, yeah, we are this year we started the production of tiles, and we want to use these tiles for a wine press. We need new tiles for our wine press, and we want to use the tiles that we are going to burn next year. So this is quite an experiment. As far as I know, only in Williamsburg this is being done in a big shaft kiln. And we have, of course, talked to a lot of experts. We've been to Bad Windsheim, because this is also done, but not in a historical building. So we can lose something. We hope we will not burn down the house, but we're sure this will not happen. The worst thing that can happen is that we lose the tiles in case we have to stop the fire, but this will not happen. So. I want to invite you, if you want to share this process, we will give a small conference next year at Bollenberg, and you see the topics. I bought a call for papers. You can find it on the book desk. Together with the book, I think there's one book left. I brought 9, so if you didn't get one, write me, I can send you one, or you can order it from our store, from our online store. But yeah, I can also send you one. Okay, so there's also the call for papers for our brickmaking conference at Bollenberg. We have several topics. Of course, the topic mediating traditional brickmaking in museums, as we do it now, but there are also other experts who do that in open-air museums or in tilery museums. Then, of course, we are interested in other experiences with brick burning in historic furnaces. So if you have experience in that, we are very interested to hear from you and to listen to you at the conference. And the third topic is about roof landscape in monument preservation. So how did the roof landscapes change, and what does this have to mean in sense of construction, and how does, am I too long?
Yeah, so good in time.
Oh, okay, just because you were looking at me. Okay.
You don't do any stress now, okay?
Okay. Yeah, so there's the call for papers is out. It's not yet on our website. We will do that when I come back. But if you have any questions, please contact me. The conference will mainly be held in German, but if you're interested and if you're not German speaking, we will see what we can arrange. That we can arrange translations for you. So I hope that we will find. Or you will share your expertise in this topic with us. Thank you very much.
So, next on my list is Stefan Kiefer from the Museum in Romania. This one? Up here?
Up here, yes. Hello everybody, my name is Ciprian Ștefan. I'm the General Director of Asta Museum and also the President of Romanian National Museum Network. Thank you very much to the associations for these organizations and to our host, because everything is very good. The food is
Except
so good.
Except yesterday.
Because we are second time present on associations and this event, I want to tell just a few things about our museum, and after that, in the coffee break, I will be more than honored with my colleague Lucian Rocu to tell you more about our programs. And also, if not, in this evening, because we bring some water life together with us, and I guess the discussion will be better then. Our museum, it has 100 hectares, and I told you this number because it has a logic, and more than 300 buildings. And for us, was a huge challenge, and it is a huge challenge to know how we will manage to preserve this museum in 10 or 15 years. And we find some answers. The answers are the local resources that still exist in Romania with a lot of know-how. In this order, we build some programs for them. So now we have around 18 programs involving 870 activities during all the year for those resources that still exist in Romania. It's not about just the craftsmen or the artisans, it's about assuring the future of our museum and assuring the future of our cultural offers in the future, because we are also have these digitalization problems and digitalization issues, but I guess the authenticity of the tradition that Astra Museum presents should be in the same way like it was. It's not easy, because you have to work with the people and to make them understand why it's important to go further with the crafts, why it's important to consider those values very important for them in a sustainable way. So we don't stop just presenting them in the museum and just showing them to the public. We create a network between them and the visitors. And also we are dealing with them to understand what is a business plan, what means cultural entrepreneurship, why it's important to sell the products in the store, why it's important to have them present in the companies which are dealing with the restorations of the buildings. So, just a few numbers of our events from this summer, because for us it's important the income also to show to the authorities that our strategies, our new strategies regarding the rural communities have results. It is a huge challenge also for us to make them understand that cultural tourism cannot exist without cultural landscape, and cultural landscape owns the local people. What should we do for the local people? And for me as a director of the museum, it's the best way to show them if you show the numbers to the politicians and to the authorities. And we show them the numbers and the proof that those programs, of course on small scale, can be exported to be on the large scale programs for Romanian villages and for Romanian countryside. How we succeed? It's not easy, but we go on, and we will until somebody said, okay, you have to change something, but also then we will be very prepared not to do that. In the countryside in Romania, those are the regions where we are involved, and we will be involved because it's not easy. But for us, it's important for them to know and to re-understand their local values. And those are the sustainable crafts that we identified, and those sustainable crafts can be very well planted on economical market in the restoration sphere. So we create in the museum a database, and we offer those databases to the companies which are dealing with the restorations. In this way, we assure the future for us, because again, who will maintain 300 buildings in an open-air museum in 10 or 15 years? Just a few photos. I still have 40 seconds. Just a few photos from our activities. Those are activities for the communities. This is Astra Multicultural, which involves around 10 national minorities, which we present in the museum. Romanian Blouse Day. And this is Romanian Young Craftsmen Olympics. We had every year 250 young people who wants to, who present for the public the traditional products, artisan products. And our main challenge is to have 10% of them continue with this craftsman. We have 2 stores, and they have a special corner over there to sell the products. National Fair, Garden and Landscape in Astra Museum, because we have these issues. We have a few rural seats in Romania, but nobody offered to the inhabitants some directions in order to preserve the homestead, to present the agricultural landscape, the gardens and everything. And we do that in the museum, showing to them how to do that, how to fix a fence, how to use local resources. And this is what we are doing in the field, finding new resources, finding new craftsmen, bring them in the museum and help us to fix our objects that we have in our collections. Because this year CPU is European Regional Gastronomy, we create on 2 hectares a place where we cultivate regional grains and regional vegetables, but we also present them in our gastronomical programs in the museum, not just the receipt and the products, but also the instrument that they use to cook and to eat this food. This is a normal day in the museum when we have events. And we like to say that we are Astra, not just a museum of phenomenon. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much. Last but not least is Marit from the Estonian Open Avenue.
So hello to everybody. I'm Marit from the Estonian Open Museum, and I'd like to bring you some news what's going on right now at our museum. Well, it's our territory is about 70 hectares. We have about 80 exhibit buildings, and until now we have mostly presented 19th century, and part of our exposition is also about the first half of the 20th. It's the time of the pre-war Republic of Estonia. But a big part of contemporary history has been missing till now. But at this moment we are building a Soviet block of flats at the museum, and this would perfectly fill in that gap, and it also enables us to come to the present day. So, as you know, Soviet regime has brought big changes to our country. It meant expropriation of land, collectivization, establishing of collective farms, and so on. But along with this, a completely new type of dwelling came to our rural landscapes. And this mostly started from the late 1950s, when standard designs started to be created by architects. And they were quite widespread all over the country. At first, they were very simple silica brick buildings, mostly with 4 flats. Later on they became bigger. They had 2 entrances already, 8 flats. Even later they started to be built of concrete blocks. But this is a type of house that is very common on our landscapes until nowadays. And these houses of this kind were meant for the workers and specialists working on collective farms. So when our exposition plan was updated, then we decided to include the Soviet block of flats. And when the plan was made public, of course, at first it was not, people reacted differently. There were ones who decided, who thought that it would spoil the nice rural atmosphere we have at the museum. People were, but at the same time, it has been part of our history, and we still have, we are as a museum obliged to speak about these times as well. And furthermore, as it has 4 different plats we're going to show different periods, then it enables us to come closer to the present day as well. So we found the house which was available in the southern part of Estonia, and on the picture you can see that it really lies very close to a dairy barn. So it was a very usual case to have it that they stand very close to dairy barns or pigsties. And it was built in 1964 according to a certain standard design. You can see some pictures of this house. What does it look like? And it really, we can say that it's not that beautiful and nice. We were lucky, it was in good condition, and it also had some interesting elements that had survived. And we were even lucky to find one of the builders of this house. You can see it on the picture. And so from the very beginning, we thought that we should give a try and follow the examples of our good colleagues in the association. And we would also like to try to bring it in big pieces or in big blocks, like it has been done in Germany or Norway, and especially we were very much inspired by the Gamle By in Denmark, and we got good help from the colleagues there. For Estonia, it was something extremely exciting, something new that hadn't been done in our country before. So we also included specialists from the University of Technology. And what was also, it was a novel technique, something really new. We kept our fingers crossed all the time. And the distance was also big. It was about 250 kilometers that we had to take the house to the museum. But I'd like to show you a little video about transferring the house to the museum. We had a rafter party already in June, and we are going to open this house next summer. We're going to show 4 different flats from different periods, one from 1960s. This would be the true story of a young dairy farm worker who had lived in that very same building. One flat from 1970s, when the collective farms were better off and kind of good salaries in the countryside, a decent family story from that period. One flat from 1990s, the first years of the restored Republic of Estonia, which was very difficult times. And in that flat, we also want to speak about those difficult times and hardships. The collective farms were liquidated, so there was people lost their jobs, there was a lot of drinking problems, people were extremely poor. So we tried to find a good way of speaking about the problems as well. And one of the flats is going to show 218 of a present day, a modern flat, because nowadays many of these houses have been renovated into single family or 2-family residences. So we We are very excited about it, and hopefully if you come next year, then you can already see something about the house. We are all
So, now, a very warm thank you to all our colleagues who were so flexible, changing poster into presentation, presentation into poster. So, thank you very much again. And I think it would be interesting to see how, with these poster or with these presentation ideas, are spreading all over Europe. Because I think after some years you can find these ideas, maybe from the Revue in other museums. So it would be really interesting to see how they spread from these conferences all over Europe. So we have half an hour left before lunch is starting. I would suggest that everybody who's interested in more points from our colleagues now use the chance. They're sitting here. You come and talk to them, because I understand we don't want to have a discussion, but maybe Jens would like to say something.
I just have a suggestion, and I don't think I need a microphone. The suggestion is, because I enjoyed this tremendously, that we do away with these silly poster presentations. I have been a victim of that 4 years back, so I decided I'd never do it again. As you from Bucharest are now a victim of this silly statue. So I suggest we have in the future conferences like an hour or 1 hour and a half for these very brief 5-minute presentations, because we get a glimpse of very interesting projects. We have an opportunity to talk to the promoters of these projects, and this will enhance our conferences greatly, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Miklos?
Maybe the time for rediscovery again the tradition. You know, in the history of our association, for decades and decades, there was an afternoon, we called it Contribution Day. That was the most exciting part of our conference all the time, I think, because that was the time to change news about our investments, new projects, and so on and so on. So I'm totally agree with him, because I also hate these posters. As far as I remember, when we changed it, it was the reason that there were more and more presentations or contributions. So if we make a limitation of 12 or 15 at all or less, I don't know exactly at this moment, that would be far more useful, I think. May I ask, I think the new board can make a decision about it, because it's a very good proposal. May I ask a comment?
Yes, sure. I think we were very relaxed. Yeah, do so.
It is to our Bucharest colleague. We know this idea and this project because Paula Popiu already mentioned it 4 years ago. As far as I remember, at that time a Swedish colleague from Skansen asked her, what about the other minorities? Because due to the last census of population in Romania, there are about 19.5 million Romanians at all, and 86% of them are Romanians, 6.5% is Hungarians, and about 6 to 7% is Gypsies. And the rest, minorities, is over 1%. So that is the question. What about the two biggest or the largest population, minority population, presenting in the Bucharest Open Museum? Because I think that is an excellent idea for Romania itself and the Romanian cultural government to show in the Open Museums not only Romanians but the diversity of different cultures and different religions and different minorities. So I should like to ask you to pay attention for the reality. What does it mean, minorities in Romania? It's only a polite advice, nothing more. But don't answer the same, please, the same answer as it was in Paula's answer, that she mentioned it will be in the second step, but there is no second step until now. Thank you.
I want to make some I don't know in English rectification, because we are 22 million, not 90. Hungarian like 2 million. Gypsy, I don't know. But the other minorities, Russian, Lithuanian, Ukrainian, as a very, very large community. I have some example for Dobroja, where are 40 minorities living in cohabitation, very good. I don't know is the next step in this project, because the first step is to align all the minorities, all the houses in village museum.
So,
that I know.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Is there another comment? Yes, Madam Young, please.
Can you hear me?
Or just a second.
I would like to say something about the poster presentations, because I know both systems. Before we had those contributions like today, short contributions. And the reason to change to the poster presentations was that there were too many short contributions, and they were not so short when mostly also people had to join this conference. They were obliged to give a contribution, and all those contributions were in the short contributions. But I agree with Miklos that this is much clearer and not so chaotic as the poster presentation. But we have to keep them short and not too many.
So this was a good example, because all the colleagues, they were really short, even shorter than 5 minutes. So. Any other comments? Yes, please, Peter.
So I have a question about Dingamovu. How do you think it will change the visitor experience, where you're moving the entrance from what initially drops you on it into early Denmark, and then the city kind of grows in front of you. Now you're dropping them into modern Denmark, and they kind of, the past recedes, you kind of move into it. Do you think there will be a cognitive change in the guest visitor?
Well, we hope so, because we represent all kinds of people in Denmark, also people with no historical background and all. And using this trip, going backwards in time, you might have some recognition to your own life or to your parents' life, and then you can build up some historical understanding on your way to the past times. But we also have this new building to introduce much better, so we can give people bits of information on their way into the museum to prepare them for the experience, and to choose the rights for them to experience. So we hope we can do it much better.
Thank you. Any other comments? Miklos?
Sorry, I should like to ask Marek. As far as I remember, Medicam had a presentation about the other house from the Soviet times, the yellow house from the Kolos time or something like that. And she mentioned that there was a big enemy's feeling of the part of the society in Estonia, because they said this, that the Tallinn Museum is a national museum, and what to do with these Russian things. So how do you observe the acceptance of the population, of the visitors, and how do you work on helping them to understand that it's also the part of the history, because millions of Estonians were killed during the Second World War and afterwards, And now nearly half of the population is Russian, half is, or more than half is Estonian. So they have, the museum could be a very good agora for having this discussion and having this debate about what does it mean new Estonia today. And with these tools like this building could be a very good tool for the museum workers and everybody to understand the history.
Well, do you mean the House of National Believers?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. There was a new complex. It was which includes one of the minorities. It's Russian old believers who have lived in Estonia starting from 17th century, and the complex also includes another. It's not. They are ethnically Estonians, but Orthodox group living in the southeast. And they make up a center of multicultural Estonia. And to my mind, this part of the museum really, we have a special curator who works with different kinds of ethnic minorities and nationalities living in Estonia. We have special programs where they can introduce their life traditions. Recently we had a very interesting exhibition about where they could tell about their experiences, how they see Estonia, what is their opinion of Estonia and Estonians. And we also addressed the Russian, the number of Russian-speaking visitors at our museum is growing, and I think that that new complex is very important for them. But as this is it still comes from more distant part. It doesn't tell that much about Soviet people, let's say. So this Russian minority has been there for centuries already. They have been, and I think that these Russian minorities, these are old believers. They are something new for the present-day Orthodox Russians as well. But we have several events that kind of bring together the Estonian community, the Russian community, as well as those all national minorities. So I think that we are really glad that the number of Russian-speaking visitors is growing. We have our school has an educator, a person who is specialized on those Russian groups. They are very, very actively participating, interested in both those Russian traditions as well as mostly Estonian. So I hope that we are doing well.
Thank you very much. If there isn't any other comment, I now would like to finish this part of the morning. So thank you very much for your attendance. And we'll meet again at 1:30, and we are all very much looking forward to the future of IOM, which will be presented by Henry. So please enjoy your lunch, and we see you at 1:30 again.
Chyba zatrzymać może prezydent teraz. Zatrzymać